Your prompts suck, most likely. But that's okay, because this video will fix that. Prompt engineering is one of the most important skills you can learn. 99% of ChatGPT users have no clue how to write effective prompts. With good prompts, you can drastically improve the capabilities of AI models. But this is a common misconception. In the long run, nobody knows what will happen. But in the short term, AI will not take your job. People who have mastered AI will. So if you want to prepare for the future, watch until the end. Prompts are everywhere, so mastering prompt engineering will help you build agents, use ChatGPT like a pro, create amazing AI images, become a better writer, develop a deep understanding of AI, and much, much more. The demand for great prompt engineers is growing rapidly. Every large company is currently hiring AI-focused people, so why not become one of them? So what even is prompt engineering? It's the art of designing the prompt or message you send to the AI. Think of it as social skills, but for communicating with AI. Social skills help you communicate effectively with people. Prompt engineering helps you communicate effectively with AI. So by using the same tools and same models as everyone else, you can get completely different results just by writing better prompts. So module number 1, the must-know principles. Give the model enough context. Most of you right now are not giving AI enough context, therefore limiting its performance. It cannot see inside of your head, so providing enough context alone will improve LLM results across the board. So mistake number 1 people make is not providing enough context, but mistake number 2 they make is including a bunch of waffle, a bunch of extra information that's irrelevant. That is just as bad. Another mistake is not trying again. Don't give up after your first prompt fails. Try again and make the next prompt better. Experiment as much as possible. Don't assume the AI can't do something just because your first attempt was unsuccessful. Most of the time, your bad prompting is to blame, not the model. Don't try to do everything at once in your prompts. Separate more complex tasks into several smaller steps. Just by implementing this, the usefulness of the model instantly increases. For the most complex and lengthy tasks, consider building a team of agents. Now, make it visually clear. This is underrated one, and people don't understand why. It also adds tokens in between the sections, and that can help AI understand the prompt a bit more. So what expert prompt engineers do is they use Markdown to write their prompts. I think this actually has a side effect of accessing more high quality data inside of the training graph of the model. Formatting it properly, like scientist or a researcher would do, you access higher quality data. At least that's my theory. This is another super important part of writing great prompts, especially with longer ones. Repetition reinforces important elements within the LLM's limited context window. So every AI model has a context window, and the more stuff you put in, the more likely it is to forget something. So when something is important, when something is key, just repeat it multiple times. Put it at the start, put it in the middle, put it at the end. Don't be afraid to repeat. Repeat every important part and stress that it is important several times. Next trick is to give the model a role. This is called role-playing. Just by assigning the model a role, you can significantly improve the results. So turn your model into a professional X, like a programmer, an expert, writer, a senior developer, whatever. Just give it a role of someone who would be perfect for the task you're using it for. There is no reason not to do this. I mean, it takes zero effort. Pro tip, use emotional stimuli. Adding an emotional story or, a reason can often trick the LLM into doing things that it otherwise would just refuse to do. So this tip actually comes from Benjamin Bush, which is a member of our community, and he was struggling to get this to work, but when he added a traumatic backstory and a crippling mental disorder to the GPT, I mean, it sounds crazy, but it actually did work. He spent months trying this, and this was what made it work. So if you're stuck on something, try giving it some sort of emotional reason, like, this is really important to me for blah, blah, blah. If I don't do this, I might get fired. Something like that. And you'll see the LLMs will do things that they otherwise would not do, or they will go to a greater extent, greater length to make the prompt really good. Don't make the LLM hallucinate by writing bad prompts. Bad prompting can greatly increase how much the models hallucinate and give wrong information. So for example, with multiple choice questions, you have a question and you have like A, B, C, D or whatever, it is often better to not give the A, B, C, D at all. Don't give it the choices and just have it answer without that. If you tell it to pick one of the choices, it often just chooses one and hallucinates and makes up a reason for that option instead of actually reasoning for what might be the correct answer. It doesn't even try to do that. It just assumes one of them is correct and chooses it and then justifies it. So yeah, don't do this with multiple choice. Module number 2, how to implement this in your prompts. Now, I took all these prompting principles and turned them into pre-made prompts for you. Here is a little teaser, and you can find these below the modules in my community. So if you want to access all of these pre-made prompts, then make sure to join my community. It's the first link in the description, and you'll also get access to hundreds of other people who are taking AI seriously and are on the cutting edge, which honestly is priceless. So if that sounds interesting, make sure to join. Now here is an example of role-playing. If you don't use it, you might say, please help me with my health problem, like my elbow hurts or something, right? But if you do role-playing, you say, you are a doctor who has extensive experience in helping young athletes recover from injuries. And then you describe the injury, give it context. And this, just by giving it a role that it's a doctor with extensive experience in the area that hurts. So maybe, I don't know, your eye hurts or whatever. Like, you get the point. You can specify it, and that way, the answer you get is much more relevant and much more useful to your problem. Here's an example of repetition, right? So here, this is before, no repetition, and after. You say, here I highlighted this 4 prompts at once. And as you can see, it's right here in the rules, and it's right here below. So if you say twice, the likelihood of it actually following that is like goes through the roof. So if something is important, say it at least twice in the prompt. Formatting. So this is, just normal formatting that isn't really organized or anything, but this is Markdown. Just splitting it like this could make a huge difference. Again, not necessarily for the AI itself, although it will access slightly better training quality information from the training data, but this is much better for you when you're writing the prompt, engineering them, seeing like, okay, this is the task, this is the information, these are the rules, this is the personality of the AI, and you can fine tune each of them. If it's just a one big block of text, like, how can you work with that? Here's an example of how it can go wrong when you let the LLM choose, instead of having it use reasoning and try to come up with the right answer. So obviously, here, all 3 answers are incorrect. The correct answer is 45. And instead of actually reasoning and giving you the correct answer, the AI just chooses one of them. And GPT 3.5 chose 63, GPT 4 chose 57. I guess 57 is less wrong than 63, but both are obviously completely wrong. Module number 3, the fundamentals of prompting. Few shorting equals good. So few shorting means simply providing examples. These can be examples of good responses or things which worked for you in the past, or anything else that might be useful for the AI. It is a basic concept utilized by almost all of the more complex systems, which we'll touch on later in this presentation. Now, zero shorting is the exact opposite of few shorting, and zero shorting is bad. It means not providing examples. So, provide examples when possible. This is especially useful. Giving examples is especially useful with complex and niche applications where there might not be enough information online, or that might require the AI to really use its reasoning capabilities. So the more complex your task is, the more crucial it is that you provide examples. So this is a really good framework that I use. If you need a fast answer, go with zero shot. If you need a good answer, provide examples. Sometimes you just need a quick, search, ask ChatGPT something to explain something. That's fine. Just type out one sentence and hit enter. Obviously, you're not going to include a bunch of examples there. But if you're working on an important task and you want the LLM to perform at its best, then you would include 5, 7, 10 solid examples. Chain of thought. Now we're getting into the interesting concepts. So chain of thought makes the LLM break down complex problems into a series of intermediate steps before providing the final answer. So instead of tackling the problem all at once, the LLM has to break it down into steps, and then it's much easier for it to perform well. Because if you say code Minecraft in Unity, that's a massive task. But if you say, your task is to code Minecraft in Unity, break it down into 15 smaller steps. Sure, that is still the same goal. The goal is the same. The task is the same. But by breaking it down into 15 smaller steps, it can focus on each of the steps at once, and it's much higher likelihood that it will reach the goal when it has to do 1/15 of a massive task. So the key idea is to demonstrate that the intermediate steps needed to solve a problem rather than just providing the final answer right away, which is much harder. And the same is for a person. I mean, imagine you hired a new person and you gave them a massive project. Like, that's asking for disaster. Rather, just give them a small, like, you can give them the massive project, but then break it down into small tasks that they can handle, right? And this is the single prompt that's like works like magic. So if you just insert this at the end of all of your prompts, you will have instantly, just by adding this, instantly improve the capabilities of ChatGPT or whatever AI you're using. So let's work this out in a step-by-step way to be sure we have the right answer. This alone greatly improves the capabilities of the models. So why is chain of thought important? Well, it breaks down complexity. It demystifies complex tasks by turning them into a series of smaller, more solvable steps. It reduces the likelihood of errors. A more structured approach minimizes the chances of the models leaping into illogical conclusions. And it unlocks broader applications, meaning you can do more with the same model. So this is why chain of thought is important. Another concept is knowledge generation prompting. And this was especially key with smaller models, right? And it means first generating some knowledge about a topic and then asking questions. So like splitting it into two prompts. You basically tell it to like write about a topic, and it writes a bunch of things, and it basically loads that into the context window, and then you ask a question relevant to that, and this lowers hallucination. And honestly, this isn't really used with the current models, with the best models like GPT-4 Turbo or Claude 3, because LLMs are just that good. But if you want to, build agents with cheaper, smaller LLMs, this could still be quite useful. Prompt chaining is another technique. It's also known as chain of prompt, COP, not to be confused with chain of thought. And I'm going to explain the difference in a bit. So you decompose a task. The overall task is divided into more manageable subtasks, each handled by an individual prompt. And the key difference is that you do it. So you, as the prompt engineer, chain the prompts in a strategic way. That way, you get a specific result. So as the chain progresses, each prompt builds upon the previous one and refines the output of the previous prompt. So here is the difference between chain of thought and chain of prompt. That way it doesn't get too confusing. Chain of thought is the emphasis of encouraging the LLM itself to explicitly demonstrate a step-by-step reasoning process when solving a problem. While chain of prompt is the focus is on the engineer, on you, carefully designing a sequence of prompts that is most likely going to get a great result. So why is prompt chaining important? Well, it's basically steering the LLM. A single prompt leaves much to chance, much to interpretation. Prompt chaining gives you a granular control over the model's thought process. You can also inject knowledge. So chain of prompt allows you to insert knowledge, insights, or instructions at specific points in the process. So if you do a task, all at once, you cannot really go halfway through when it's generating tokens and like, hey, okay, I didn't mean it like that. But you can do that with chain of prompt because you can split it into multiple prompts. So if a response at one step seems inaccurate, you can just adjust the next step to help the model correct its course. Module number 4, level up your prompts. So this is an example of few shot versus zero shot. I want to buy a new gaming mouse, give me a recommendation, and these are just some random options, right? But with few shot, saying what you will use the mouse for, the actual outputs are much more relevant to that use case. And honestly, this could be the difference between buying a product that's okay, you can buy a good mouse, or buying the perfect mouse for you. And obviously there are much more important tasks than buying a new mouse, but this can be applied to anywhere. So just by telling it what, giving it the context and giving it examples, instead of doing zero shot, you can get massively better recommendations or results with LLMs. Chain of thought. This is without chain of thought. GPT 3.5 struggles to answer this logical puzzle, but the same model with chain of thought, just by saying, explain your reasoning step by step, just by adding that, the model can successfully solve the riddle. Now, here are some examples of prompt chaining. So, example number 1, detailed code review. You break it down into 4 different prompts, and you can do however many prompts. I just did 4. That way, it's not too overwhelming. So, provide a comprehensive analysis. This is the main task. A comprehensive analysis of a given code snippet, and then you guide it through different prompts. So, summarize the code functionality in English is a prompt 1. The LLM does that. Then you start with prompt 2. LLM does that, and then you do prompt 3 and 4, and at the end, you're much more likely to end up with a great outcome than if you try to, boom, put everything at once and like hope and pray like, please ChatGPT give a good answer. That's not a good strategy. Here's a second example for writing. Help elevate writing style. So this one, I think most of you can use this somewhere. Analyze this text, insert sample text, identify any overused words or phrases. So, to be a good writer, you don't want to overuse words too much. It analyzes that and it focuses entire attention of that response on just one thing. And then you another prompt, and by doing this, you can turn your text into something much better than if you just tried to tell it 5 different things in a single prompt. It will do all of them, but mediocre. If you do this, it will do all of them really well. Knowledge generation prompting. So, number 1, enhance Q&A on niche topics. Smaller models often lack the training data for specialized domains. Knowledge generation prompting is the solution, right? So, let's say like knitting, or I guess knitting is still quite popular. Something like super niche, something that's like doesn't have much training data, especially if the model is small. By having it generate some knowledge on that and then asking the question, you can it can completely get a different result. Or creative storytelling. So, problem. Smaller models that are limited, let's say Mistral 7B or Llama 7B, struggle with generating original long-form narratives. And the solution with knowledge generation prompting is to prompt the model to brainstorm the plots, characters, stuff like that first, and then feed them into next prompts to guide the development of a more complex story. So that's how you can, just 2 examples how you can use knowledge generation prompting with smaller, less intelligent LLMs. Module number 5. Intermediate prompt engineering. Rephrase and respond. Ask the LLM to rephrase your question and then answer. This will show you whether the AI actually understands your prompt. So if the task is obvious, like what's the weather today, or explain a concept, something like that, you would not use this. But if you're trying to explain something more complicated, something not so obvious, or maybe if English isn't your first language and you're not sure whether you explain it correctly, this could be a game changer because you can see that the AI, how the AI understands it and whether that is correct with your understanding. And another great trick is having the AI generate a question. So let's say my arm hurts, ask me 7 questions to better assess my situation. Instead of saying, most people would say probably, my arm hurts, how can I make it stop hurting? And that would give such a generic responses. I mean, the chances of that solving your problem is so low. But if you say, ask me 7 questions like, okay, did you fall? Did you do any physical activities and stuff like that? Or how does it hurt? Is your bone broken? And you can answer them. And after you answer them, the AI has much more context on giving you a useful response. So sometimes you don't even know what to tell it. You don't know what context to provide. In that case, just say, ask me 10 questions about to better assess my situation. It will do that. You will answer them, and then you'll get a seriously better response. Tree of thought. Now, this is a fascinating concept. So it's similar to chain of thought, but a bit more advanced, a bit more interesting. It's a very powerful concept when combined with agents. So this is a beautiful visual that explains the different prompting techniques. On the left, this is what most of you probably are doing, honestly. This is just input, output, or I/O. So you give an input and the LLM gets an output. That's it. No really prompt engineering techniques there. The next level is chain of thought prompting. So you make the LLM break it into tasks and you get output. This already is a huge improvement. What's even better though is self-consistency with chain of thought, which means you have it do that multiple times, and I'm going to explain self-consistency in a bit, so don't worry. But basically you have it do that multiple times, and then it chooses the majority, based on the majority of the outcomes. So let's say, I don't know, you have 5 outcomes, you have 5 different chats, and 3 of them give the same answer. Well, that is the final answer, right? So this is even better. But you can achieve the best results with tree of thought. And that is basically generating like a tree, as you can see from the name and from the graph, of different possible paths the LLM can go. And then you can like get to a point that you otherwise would never access if you just use, input, output, or chain of thought. So the key difference between chain of thought and tree of thought is that chain of thought is linear. There's only one channel, as you can see. Like this image is beautiful. There is only a single like progression, and there is no way to like backtrack or explore multiple different thought processes or options. While tree of thought can backtrack if something doesn't work and explore more ideas. You can get to more unique or esoteric solutions that otherwise you would never get to with standard, chain of prompt or just input output. Also, tree of thought often produces way better results at complex tasks, but it's also harder to implement. So this is like, basically, what's it called, like risk to reward, or like the more you put in, the more you get out. And that's the same in every skill in life. Like the more you try, like if you spend, 1,000 hours playing football, you'll be decent. But if you spend 10,000 hours playing football, you might be a professional footballer. Or if you spend 30,000 hours, you might play in the Premier League. Like, the same compounding is with prompt engineering. If you are willing to learn the more advanced concepts, you will get much better results. But you have to learn them, and you have to go through that initial period of being bad at it, of sucking, right? So here is just an example of the power of tree of thought. Especially the middle chart is, I think, really solid. You can see input, output, tragic results. Chain of thought, already massive improvement. But tree of thought completely destroys both. And this is just, one example. Now let's take a look at RAG, or in other words, Retrieval Augmented Generation. Now, this sounds way more complex than it actually is. So don't be afraid of big words. It can be overwhelming, but it's actually quite easy to understand. It's essentially a better version of knowledge generation prompting by feeding external information, maybe from a PDF, from a text document, into the LLM. Stuff that might be proprietary business knowledge or something like your private information that's not available on the web, hopefully. The LLM doesn't have access to that. With RAG, you can feed it into the relevant information into the LLM and greatly enhance the results. And it's used a lot in programming, where it's often combined with vector embeddings from a multidimensional vector database, where you find the best suited, like the most accurate representation, the most relevant information, and you feed it into the response. So here are the 3 steps of RAG. Number 1, search. First, the model searches the vector database to find k nearest neighbors, or in other words, the most similar results. Understanding. Secondly, the model reads through the sources and analyzes them to understand them. And then generation. The model generates an output based on the information inside the documents. So why is RAG important? Well, to change the knowledge of a model, you need to retrain it. And that takes a lot of resources, a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of compute, right? By utilizing RAG, you can bypass the need for retraining for every single information, for every single new piece of text, new piece of data. You can just feed it through RAG and limit hallucinations by doing so for much cheaper and much faster. So you can have a separate agent doing each of the steps and create an efficient process of RAG. And most, tools like, LangChain has RAG, pretty sure CrewAI as well. Most of them already come with RAG. So automatic reasoning and tool use, and which is art, and program-aided language models. Now I'm just gonna simplify this into tool use. Art is tools, Pal is programs. You can learn these advanced names, but just think of it as tools, basically tool usage. These are systems designed to help LLMs deal with complex tasks that cannot be accomplished just by a language model. It needs something else, right? So it essentially means allowing the LLM to use external tools or programs to its advantage. The difference between these two is basically negligible. That's why I'm just going to refer to them as tools. So how do external tools work when used with LLMs? So when the model reaches a point where a tool is needed, it stops generating tokens and it calls to a tool and rewrites the prompt into a format which the tool can use, which is most often JSON. the tool outputs a JSON response back, the LLM takes that and processes the answer and gives it to you in plain English. So where can we find LLMs with tools? Well, ChatGPT uses a bunch of tools. Code Interpreter is one of them, but some other ones are, DALL-E 3 as a tool. What else it has? Is Code Interpreter DALL-E 3? I don't even know. But yeah, it has access to a bunch of tools. Oh yeah, the external documents as well. So like, those are all tools. The LLMs cannot do that itself. It's a tool, or in other words, a piece of code, usually a function or multiple functions programmed that the LLM can use to its advantage. So with Code Interpreter, it can open files, test code, update spreadsheets, do precise math, and about 100 other things. Thanks to Code Interpreter. Things that ChatGPT itself, the model GPT-4 Turbo, cannot do. So every advanced team of agents uses tools, by the way, to achieve more things than simple LLMs can. Perplexity, another example, uses several tools to quickly scrape numerous websites like Reddit, Wikipedia, Google, stuff like that, and give you relevant, helpful answers, which are then processed by LLMs. The answer is processed by LLMs, but the information is gathered by tools. Another concept, directional stimulus prompting, or DSP. Again, the name is complicated, but it's simple. It's basically examples, but a more subtle way, a more like guiding way, right? So it's adding a small, carefully designed element called a directional stimulus to your LLM prompt. And this DSP concept targets the style, format, and direction of the response, right? So it subtly nudges the model in a specific direction without dictating the exact content that it should do. While, on the other hand, you have few-shot learning, which is providing examples where you provide concrete examples of the desired output. DSP is more subtle. It's more like just, directional. It's not limiting the LLM as much as saying, hey, I want this example. So in some cases, you want to give concrete examples. In some cases, you want to leave that a bit more open, a bit more ambiguous. That way, the model can do its thing more freely. Module number 6, from theory to practice. So here is an example of how to implement rephrase and response, right? So you might say, write out 5 of the most important steps I should take to live longer. It's an alright prompt, but it's like very basic and uses like very, casual language, not as much scientific or professional. It will not trigger good parts of the training data. If you instead say the same thing, rephrase this question and then respond, ChatGPT rephrases it into more like professional, more proper way of saying that. So instead of write out 5 of the most important steps I should take to live longer, the rephrased better question is, what are the top 5 essential actions to extend lifespan? And that alone will hit on more like scientific, more research papers, training data, because just of the keywords it uses, the way it's phrased. So this can be really fast way of improving your prompts. Here is an example of where directional stimulus prompting managed to do something impressive. So standard prompting, you just say question. By the way, this on top, this article, this input text and reference, these are accessible by both of the LLMs. You just give the prompt right here. This is the only variable that changes. So summarize the above article briefly in 2 to 3 sentences. A very short prompt, kind of lazy prompting, like most people would do, right? But then you use directional stimulus prompting by giving it a hint. So you just say Bob Barker TV, blah, blah, blah. All of this information is already in the text above. But by guiding it, giving it that directional stimulus, giving it that bit of a direction, bit of a hint, the output is much better. See, like the score goes from 34, where a lot of the key information is lacking, to a 48, where all of the key points were hit. Here is what LLMs look like without RAG. It's lacking key information about this physics competition, but with RAG, where you give it the PDF, it's able to list it out, right? This is an example of what happens without tools, right? LLMs, like without tools, are not as useful. So here's ChatGPT 3.5 struggling to answer a simple question what the weather today is in Prague. But with tool usage, that question is a piece of cake. If the LLM was truly smart, it would know that in Czech Republic everybody uses Celsius to measure the temperature, and it wouldn't give the answer in Fahrenheit, obviously. Now, for those of you who want to take AI seriously, I would highly recommend joining the community. The next two modules, 7 and 8, which are the most advanced, are exclusively available for my community members. So, if you really want to master prompt engineering and get access to all of the prompt templates I made, as well as all the other courses and workshops like on how to build and deploy AI agents or how to use ChatGPT like a pro, if you want to access all of that, as well as hundreds of other people on the cutting edge of AI, consider joining. It's the first link in the description.